Someone sits in a room alone with a drug in their system that requires another person in the room. And the person watching is a rectangle of light. Today we're putting the consulting room on the couch. In the late 90s, I wrote a paper in graduate school at the dawn of the internet, making the argument that therapy could and should go digital. I surmised that the consulting room was like a stage, that a client prepared for it, composed for it, performed the hour and left, going back to a life that I never saw. The professor, a small woman who dressed like Anna Freud and knew it, read it and told me it would never work. It's probably my worst grade in graduate school. Something's lost when the body leaves the room, she thought. I thought she was afraid of the future. She thought I was young. 30 years later, I still don't know who was right. Some of what I said would happen happened. Access opened. People who couldn't normally get care because of transportation or other limitations could get that care. And then there is a room I want to show you that a patient sits in with a drug in their system. And somewhere in the house is supposed to be another person, a babysitter, a friend, a partner, somebody who said yes. Nobody has to verify that there is a person in the room. And on the screen, there's a clinician who can see that person, talk to them, call for help. But what the clinician cannot do is reach that person. Somebody signed off on that room. Somebody looked at it and found that adequate. There's a card at the end of this, a fortress with only one way in. Welcome to the world on the couch, where we put the news cycle through a psychological lens. This is not clinical diagnosis, but analysis and commentary. And I'm Dr. Marlene Ryle. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner and psychologist with 30 years of experience in the field. Mental health care is being reorganized around what can be measured, scaled, and time-bounded. A for-profit system moves towards what it can count, because what it can count, it can bill for. The things that are expanding: ECT, formerly known as shock therapy, TMS, transmagnetic stimulation, and Spravato treatment. Every one of them is a treatment where something is administered: a drug, a machine, a device with a purchase price and a depreciation schedule. There's an object in the room. Talk therapy has an object too. It's the other person. That's not a metaphor. The relationship is the active agent. The thing being administered in these is in doses over years. It has no purchase price and no depreciation schedule, and it does not appear on anyone's asset ledger. The loss isn't in the care. The loss is in the ledger's capacity to even see the care. Last week in a Substack called Healthcare Uncovered, Dr. Seth Glickman, who was formerly an insurance and healthcare company executive, looked at United Healthcare's Schedule Y filings. Now, these are disclosures that the company is required to make. He tracked every behavioral health acquisition from 2011 to 2025. Of the 70 outpatient entities that they acquired, 37 closed entirely or closed at least one office. Of 216 individual locations, 108 are now gone in 21 states. Optum spent over $1 billion on Refresh Mental Health. This company had over 300 in-person offices, which they are slowly closing. Then they spent $470 billion on a company called Able2, a digital therapy platform. This venture arm's portfolio is almost entirely and uniformly virtual. Medical loss ratio rules cap how much an insurer can grow in their margin on the insurance itself. So the growth actually has to come from owning the services now. And the services worth owning are almost entirely digital. The capital is flowing towards the legible instrument in their own filings. In November, an entire statewide behavioral health operation in New Jersey shuttered, losing 572 jobs and affecting thousands of mental health care patients. In Memphis, the only facility dedicated to eating disorders was closed. Now, eating disorders carries the highest mortality of all psychiatric disorders. This facility also took Medicaid. In Columbus, a counseling practice that served people with autistic disorders was closed, and the services in that area closed with it. Now, none of that required anyone to make a decision that people with eating disorders don't matter or people with autistic disorders don't matter. Nobody really had to decline it because there was nothing on the ledger to decide about. And it's not just insurance companies. Local hospitals are making the same moves. What they're expanding are the treatments with an object in the room. TMS chairs, ECT suites, infusion rooms. What gets lost is an hour in person for talk therapy. Ask a system how the mental health service is performing, and you get satisfaction surveys. Did the patient feel heard? Was the staff courteous? Satisfaction is a measure of the appearance of care. It became the metric because it was the part that was the easiest to collect. Now, one of the good things here is that some hospitals are actually expanding their inpatient psychiatric capabilities. The state inpatient beds are growing for the first time since the 1950s. At the same time, large operators are buying up digital outpatient platforms. Capacity is moving toward the inpatient bed and therapy platforms, both of which count cleanly. What we lose is the ongoing relationship in the community with someone who knows their history. Now, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I am a prescriber. So let me take you into that room when it has to do with ketamine, because I have prescribed ketamine off-label. Now, ketamine is the biggest thing to happen to psychiatry in 50 years. For some people with depression that has been refractory for years or decades, this therapy can work, and it works in hours instead of weeks or months. I've seen it, and I'm not here to talk you out of ketamine therapy. But here's what almost nobody outside the field knows. There are two versions of ketamine, and they're governed by completely different rules. The first is called Spravato, S-ketamine, which is FDA approved for the treatment of depression and suicidality. Now, it comes with a legal condition attached. The patient has to take it in a certified clinic, and someone has to watch them for a certain period of time, usually 2 hours afterward. This isn't a recommendation. This is a condition of the approval. The second is ordinary ketamine, compounded or generic, prescribed off-label, meaning the FDA approved this drug, but not for this particular use. Now, off-label prescribing is ordinary medicine. A great deal of psychiatry does it. I do it often, and it's really not a scandal. But what it means is that the rules that are attached to Spravato were not written to cover off-label prescribing. So there is no certified clinic. There is no 2-hour watch. There's no requirement that anyone actually be there at all. And that gap is the whole business. It's the same drug family with two very different structures. In the clinic, someone can put a hand on an arm. Someone can call a code. At home on a screen, I could see it happening. I could talk the person through it if I could. I could call for help, call whoever else is in the home if there's someone else in the home. But what I can't do is actually reach them. Now, nobody weighed that risk and accepted it. The risk was never an input. The clinic costs money, and the room costs money, and the version without them is the one that scales. In the 90s, I worked in day treatment, which has all since disappeared. And the director said that our job with the population, which was of the seriously and persistently mentally ill, was to keep them out of the hospital. Since then, no one has ever asked me to do that, but I still do it. Nobody has ever counted the reductions in hospitalizations except me. Talk therapy over video works. People get care who could not get care before. Rural patients, people without a car, people who can't take 3 hours off of a workday for a 50-minute session. Patients show me a version of their life much more quickly in virtual therapy than I would have seen from their own descriptions in my office. That's the paper I wrote in graduate school. It arrived, and I was right about that. Talk therapy over video works, but that's not why it won. The card I selected to embody today's episode is the Four of Discs from the Aleister Crowley tarot deck. Now, this deck calls this card Power. Now, discs are about manifestation, material things, money, buildings. Now, only the wealthy and powerful can build a fortress like the one that's shown here. But a fortress can become an island. There's only one way in and one way out of this castle. And that can cut you off from the land as surely as protect you from it. From inside, the vision is pretty narrow. What happens out there, outside the fortress, only matters as much as it affects you inside. Whether the field gets plowed and worked, as long as the money's flowing in, their view's fine. But outside the wall, the clinic is closed. The relationship is ended, and there's the hospitalizations that nobody's counting. So when you make that appointment, find out whether there's someone holding a screen or whether you're just talking to one. Thanks for watching The World on the Couch. I'm Dr. Marlene Ryle, and the couch is always open.